Welcome back to MGI. You are listening to the voices of
Chill with Rome's.
Jurassic, Mark.
and Osheem, the one and only. Last month's episode was a movie starring Sandra Bullock on Netflix, Premonition. Pretty good movie. We all had some interesting comments to say about it. Go ahead and check out that movie, then check out our review. Today's episode is based on probably, as far as Hollywood standards goes, one of the greatest movies of all time, or held to a great record. JM, this was your choice, so go ahead and tell us what the Shawshank Redemption is all about and why you chose it for today.
Well, beginning with the second question, I chose it because it's so well regarded. I mean, it's on basically every list you can find on the internet of the greatest movies ever made. People can't say enough good things about this film. I think last I checked, it was actually number one on the Internet Movie Database's rankings. I'll have to double check after we record. In his review of it, Roger Ebert said a lot of people compare the viewing of this film to a religious experience. It's got this really passionate following, and yeah, it had been a glaring entry on my list of movies I need to see. It just seemed like one of those cultural touchstones. So I'm really glad that you guys let me pick this one and that we're going to talk about it together. Anyway, getting to the plot, without spoiling too much, it's about a banker from Maine, because every Stephen King story, with a couple of exceptions, is based in Maine or connected to Maine somehow. But it's about a Maine banker who is unjustly convicted of murdering his wife and her lover, and then he is sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences at the fictional Shawshank State Prison, where he befriends a man named Red Redding, who is basically the prison's go-to smuggler, one of the prison's go-to smugglers. He's described as a man who knows how to get things. And this is a story about the friendship between Andy and Red, which unfolds over literal decades. I think 19 years initially, not to spoil too much. And it's a slice of life story. It talks at length about the experiences these men undergo in prison, and it's an unflinching look at the injustices of the prison system, but it's also very hopeful. And if that sounds vague, just take it as my prompting to watch the movie for yourself so you can see what the hell I'm talking about.
Yeah, awesome. You don't have to worry too much about spoilers because we're gonna be talking about nothing but this movie for the next 45 minutes. But...
Fair enough. I think in the intros, I'm a little cagey about dropping spoilers just because, if somebody only listens to the first 5 minutes or whatnot, I want to be kind of sensitive to those folks. But on the other hand, they're turning us off, so fuck them.
Oh man, yeah. No, that's fine. I mean, either way, yeah, like whenever you're describing a movie, even if it's like a spoiler discussion, like, yeah, I get wanting to only talk about it a little bit because we're going to spend the rest of this 45-ish minutes talking about the movie. So you don't have to spoil everything right in the beginning. But yeah, this movie, Shawshank, so this was a blind watch for you. Like you heard about it, but you never actually seen it. Realms, what about you?
Yeah, it's the first time I've ever seen it.
Okay, cool. So in my case, I have always seen like bits and pieces of this movie ever since I was a kid. Like I distinctly remember the scene where they go into his cell and they see that he's not there. And then the warden is like throwing little pebbles because he's just flipping out. And then he throws one at this actress's poster and sees that it pokes through. And then there's this giant hole. I remember that scene. I remember the scene of him hitting the rock in the pipe. The shit pipe. What do you call it? I don't know. The shit pipe, right?
A sewage pipe. Yeah.
Yeah, the sewage pipe.
Also known as a shit pipe.
I thought as a kid when I saw that scene, I thought that was just him wanting to cause some damage to the prison, and that's it. I didn't know that that was his escape, And then he ends by actually escaping. There was a happy ending and everything. But yeah, so this was kind of a blind watch for me because I had never seen it from beginning to end completely. So, and I was also aware that like this by a huge margin is considered one of the greatest movies of all time, and this was definitely a really, really good movie. So Tim Robbins plays Andy Dufresne, and I gotta be honest, a lot of these actors, I feel like I haven't seen that much. Morgan Freeman, yes. Like Morgan Freeman to me is legendary. I've seen him in so many things. But Tim Robbins, not so much. Clancy Brown, this was an interesting one. I'm sure you guys grew up on some extent with SpongeBob SquarePants.
Yeah.
So Clancy Brown, that's Mr. Krabs.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. You know what? He seems to like overbearing characters.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, kind of fit the role for him, huh?
Where's me money, Dufresne?
Oh man. And then Bob Gunton, the warden, played by Bob Gunton, he was in Daredevil. I've talked to you guys about Daredevil a few times, the Netflix show. So all the actors were really, really good. It's just I didn't really recognize a lot of them, unfortunately, except for like a few that I had already named. So while we're on the subject of the characters, on the subject of Hadley, so he's one of those, as it came off, stereotypical super cruel prison guards, right? Who beats on the inmates and like does what he wants and whatnot. There was at one point when Dufresne was talking to him about like taxes, something to do with taxes, and how like I don't know, I don't remember exactly what the conversation was. He threatened to throw Dufresne off the roof, but convinced him not to. And then the advice that Dufresne gave him, he took him up on it, and apparently it worked. So from that point forward, there was also the case of how Dufresne was constantly getting raped by the bull queers, the sisters, as Red called them.
Sisters, yeah.
Yeah. But after a certain point, Hadley beats the shit out of the main one, which told me that Hadley has some sort of loyalty to Dufresne, or if not, why did he do that? Why did Hadley beat the shit out of the bull queer if it wasn't because of loyalty?
Well, I mean, at that point, Dufresne was simply making everybody too much money. Like he was doing everybody's taxes for free. I don't know if at that point in the story he had already started helping the warden commit these white collar crimes. But yeah, bottom line is Dufresne was too useful to the guards and to the management. You know, they grew to depend on him. And you see him kind of leverage that dependency throughout the film sometimes, like to get away with things. You know, that's how he's able, well, that's partially how he's able to build his prison library, because he knows he's uniquely useful to the guards and to the warden. So they're inclined to grant him certain allowances other prisoners probably wouldn't get.
Okay, yeah, I totally understand the sentiment of like, yeah, he's useful, and like they're actually benefiting off of him being there, like being in the prison and doing everybody's taxes. But the part that I just didn't understand was that sense of necessity that the prison saw in Dufresne. It didn't really last, because there was a certain point where he was locked in solitary, right? And Hadley didn't really do anything to help him. He was just listening to the warden, you know?
I mean, you know, they wanted to make it clear that they were in charge. He was in solitary because of that iconic scene where he takes over the announcing booth and like plays some light opera for the entire prison complex. And yeah, that's not something that they could let him get away with, you know, scot free. They had to make a show of punishing him. But I have no doubt that they granted him special leniency because he was useful. And I remember like later in the film when he was threatening to quit working for the warden on all these illegal schemes, the warden threatened to like take him out of his, you know, one bedroom cell and like put him with like the ultra violent criminals and whatnot. So he was an instrument to them.
I quote the warden, he said, "You'll think you got fucked by a train."
Yeah, yeah.
I thought that he said he'll put him with the sodomites. I thought the message was that like the sodomites left him alone after like that point, after the main sodomite like kind of was crippled by Hadley.
There's a good video essay about this movie by a YouTuber called Pop Culture Detective Agency, and it's mostly a positive review, but he does argue that some of the LGBTQ allusions slash representations in this movie haven't aged particularly well, because it does sort of perpetuate the stereotype that queer men are sexually predatory, and that's not the case in a huge number of prison rape cases, you know.
Okay.
They sort of allude to that in the movie when, you know, Andy says, you know, would it help if they knew I wasn't a homosexual? And then Red says, neither are they. You have to be human first. They don't qualify.
Yeah.
But it was the 90s. You know, a lot of things have shifted optically and culturally since then.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised like people have an issue with that one because it's like the way he says it is kind of separating them from like your typical average, you know, people who are into men.
Yeah.
Like he basically said they were like monsters, like they're not even in the same category. That's just how I had interpreted it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what the film was aiming to do. And I think, yeah, to an extent it succeeded. I guess maybe it's some of, well, I don't know. Some people object to the way that like the head of the sisters is characterized, but you know, that's, if we dive into that, it's going to take up the entire episode. But no, I do appreciate that the movie tried to draw that distinction, you know? And I'm sure we were going to get into this at some point anywhere in our discussion, but The Shawshank Redemption didn't do very well when it was released. It was a commercial flop, and it only became popular after word of mouth kicked in and people started renting this and it started appearing on television, and it built up a following. And one of the points the video essay made was in the 90s, there were a lot of high profile, tough on crime policies being enacted and like converted into law. And some critics have said Americans weren't really sympathetic to a movie that made prisoners look sympathetic back then. Maybe that's why the movie didn't do so well.
They had an interview. Morgan Freeman was on some show and he was talking about word of mouth was really like the biggest way that they could have been found, but there was like nobody could pronounce Shawshank. They kept saying something different.
I saw that. Yeah, I think he was on Seth Meyers' show.
Yeah.
A couple of things for me there. Number one, I actually didn't know that this was based on a book written by Stephen King. I found that out actually just now as you mentioned it, and I was reading it on Wikipedia. So that's number one.
A novella, yeah.
Yeah, and number two, yes, this is a 90s film because it was filmed in the 90s, but I think it takes place, like the book also was written in the 80s, and it takes place even like way before that, right? Like it takes place like, I don't know, the 50s or the 60s.
Oh, it starts in the 40s and I think it ends in the 60s.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
well, no, he gets out of prison in the 60s, and who knows how old these guys are when Red finally gets out of prison, you know?
That is also true.
Yeah.
I think with, you know, how much the world has changed, I think I would have to watch that video essay to see what the actual like argument is like compelling about how, you know, some of it might not have aged well, as you were saying. But yeah, as Realm said, like I think they did a good job like making the line, or they portrayed well like the line of how like, you know, people in prison kind of become monsters, or like the true nature of like people who belong in jail, like that like kind of comes out, I guess.
Well, but and then another theme of the movie was what Andy articulated when he said, you know, I was an honest man on the outside. I had to go to prison to become a crook.
Yeah, that as well.
You know, this environment, it can breed reprehensible behavior because, you know, these people are tossed in there for life, and the system doesn't really seem to give much of a damn about their welfare.
So nobody really on the outside cares much unless it's someone that they know in prison, like someone that they care about. Like, prisoners are seen as like, you know, the worst scum of the earth. So, you know, why would we care what happens to them? But somehow Dufresne was able to write letters upon letters and have a whole library built in that prison.
Yeah.
Over the course of almost 20 years, right?
Yeah.
So I don't remember that plot point about like, I don't remember that being like a big highlight of this movie, like something memorable, I guess, that comes out of this movie. What I remember the most is like this is the movie about a guy who breaks out of prison successfully, you know? But it definitely means something that like he was able to build a whole library in what looked like a wing of the prison. Like, you know, prisons have different cell blocks, different wings, right? And he was able to turn a whole section of it, which means a lot of taxpayers' money was going towards the prison. I don't know how all
Yeah.
this works, but like people on the outside were talking to the warden and talking about like, I think there was one particular scene, or maybe I misunderstood it, of someone from the outside saying like, why are our taxpayer dollars going to this prison? Something of that sort, or maybe I misunderstood. Do you remember the scene I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think in the era in which the story is set, and I could be wrong about this, but I think private prisons weren't as common as they are today. So again, if I don't miss my mark, I think most prisons were taxpayer funded at the time. And we can talk about the ethics of having a for-profit prison, in today's environment. But bottom line is, yeah, it probably would have been taxpayer funded. I think he got the library, the film insinuates, by just simply annoying the state Senate until they finally gave in. Because, yeah, he was writing a letter a week for years on end, and it finally paid off. But then again, pretty much everything Andy does in this movie seems like it's hopeless at first, but he just keeps at it until he finally succeeds. It's like that line Red has towards the end, geology is the study of pressure and time. That's all it takes, pressure and time. So many good quotes in this movie.
Yeah. I think he also says, as you were explaining, I think another line he says is something like hope is dangerous. Something along those lines. I think he talks about how hope is dangerous, but I guess hope is one of the main themes of this movie as well.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to talk about Brooks for a second because he's the one who gets to get out and then he kills himself. And Red talks about how the reason why he did that is because he's just too institutionalized. He lived the majority of his life inside of the prison.
Yeah.
And that's all he knows and whatnot. But the thing is, Red starts to say the same thing about himself. Like he ends up in prison for like 30 years at least until he finally gets his parole approved. Here's the thing with that though. We know why Dufresne went to prison. Do we know why any of the other characters were there? Like I was wondering for a while, does Red ever mention why he was arrested? He does? Okay, well, what did he do? Why was it so bad that like he was stuck there for the majority of his life too?
Red, in one scene, he said to Andy, he said, same as you, murder. Andy had asked him if he did it, and then he was like, he's the only guilty man in Shawshank.
Yeah.
But I don't think many other people were explained. I think maybe the only other person was the new guy that showed up.
Oh God.
Yeah.
And then that poor
and
kid.
Also the guy that actually did Andy's crime. We heard more stuff of what he did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Tommy, that's the character's name. Yeah.
Right. Damn. All right. That raises another thing for me, which is okay. So the warden called Tommy out at night in one of the, I don't know, the outside portions of the prison and had him swear that he was telling the truth. And then Hadley murdered him.
Yeah.
Executed him. So what does the warden get out of keeping Dufresne? Is it really just like the scams that he's running and that's why he wants to keep him stuck there? Otherwise, like what does he really, there's no shortage of prisoners. As we see, there are always prisoners coming in. So what did the warden gain from keeping Dufresne locked in there?
So this is something that I've learned even in regular life, like working in the warehouse, working in Publix deli. They want you to know how to do everything so that they can use you to do everything. But once you know all that stuff, they don't want to see you anywhere else because who are they going to replace you with? So like it was very difficult for people even in the warehouse to I had a friend, she knew how to do a lot of the stuff at the front office, a lot of different positions up front. She wanted to switch to cherry picking, but they didn't want to do that because if she did that, she can't do all the other stuff that she was doing up front. So it was to the point where they were even hiring newer people to the cherry picking position when they should have been allowing somebody who's had time in the warehouse, some experience, to be able to do something different. If they get rid of Andy, if they let Andy go, who's gonna run that operation? He's so deep into it. It's like there's no replacing him.
Well, plus, what's Andy gonna say? I mean, he promised that he wouldn't say anything about this operation on the outside, but the warden probably wouldn't have any reason to believe that Andy would keep that promise.
Yeah. He panicked.
Yeah, and in the end, yeah, when Andy got out, he did do the warden in. Like, he released those documents, and that's how the warden finally got nailed.
And it's funny because he probably wouldn't have done that if the warden was genuinely on his side, but like he fucked them over.
Yeah.
Of course he's gonna get you back now.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, knowing Andy as we do over the course of the film, yeah, he probably would have kept his word. But
he seemed when they were talking in the library, he seemed like he was excited about all the things that he was doing being successful. He was like, yeah, by the time he retires, he's gonna be like a multimillionaire. Like, he was cool with it until that shit went down.
Yeah. And I loved the planting with the fake person Andy invented, because he mentions him about halfway through the movie. And then right at the end, it all clicks. Like, you realize, oh, this is how Andy's going to get out scot-free. He's just going to pretend to be this made-up person with his own social security card and driver's license and all this money in the bank.
I love how they called the 300,000 a 19-year severance pay.
Yeah.
Oh, my bad. For how? What were you saying?
No, I wasn't. I was just gonna say, like, I was watching this with my wife, and I didn't catch that that's the scam that they were doing, was creating a fake person and money laundering it into this person's bank account.
Yeah.
But when he got out, she was saying like, "Oh, he's just gonna pretend to be that guy that they're creating." I'm like, "What? What?" So I didn't catch that, but yeah, I guess that was pretty brilliant on Dufresne's part.
It was kind of like Catch Me If You Can, like a scheme of that sort.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
My gosh.
Going back to Tommy, through watching Orange is the New Black, I knew damn well they asked you to come outside by yourself at night. I said, he's fucked. Like, if he says the wrong thing, he's fucked. And he should have been more sharp to the fact, like, you saw what he did to Andy just telling him about the story. Mm-hmm. What do you think he's going to do with you? He should have realized telling him that he was going to help Andy was not really what the warden wanted to hear.
Yeah. Well, and, nobody was going to call the warden on having someone murdered, because as far as the outside world is concerned, Tommy tried to escape and he was shot in the back. His body was technically outside the prison walls, so that's how he could probably have spun it to the police.
They had a scene like that in Orange is the New Black. The main character, Piper, she got on somebody's bad side, and they ended up taking her outside with somebody, with another one of the inmates that didn't like her, because they knew that she was going to try to kill her. So like, anytime they take your ass outside, like that's some sketchy shit. Like I knew as soon as he said the wrong thing, they were going to kill him.
Yeah. Bad news. I haven't seen Orange is the New Black. I've been hearing great things about it. I did see the Sesame Street parody called Orange is the New Snack, which was pretty funny. It's basically about prisoners sharing snack foods, but I've got to catch the real thing one of these days.
It's pretty decent. Like, it's got like a season that I'm like, that was a weird season, but it's decent.
Nice.
So, speaking of Sesame Street, apparently the name of the character who did actually kill Dufresne's wife and the person that her wife was cheating on him with, that character's name was Elmo. Apparently.
Hell of a segue, man. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Apparently, according to Wikipedia, yeah. Bill Blender. Yeah.
He's only in that one scene, but yeah.
Yeah. Right. So a few things, I guess, that I didn't like about this movie are loose ends, and I don't know if the book picks up on them, but like Tommy, before he was killed, talked about how he shared a cell with this person in the last jail he was in with or something, or a story that he heard. But apparently now Elmo, during the events of this movie, was a free man, like he's back out on the streets or something of that sort. So there's just a murderer in this story who was like out there who could do that to other people. And that's never addressed again. There's no justice really in that case if this murderer is in this story out there on the streets. So That's one thing that I guess, I mean, but to most people, that's not really an important fact. What's important is to know that, yes, there is someone else who did that. It wasn't Dufresne,
Right.
and Dufresne is innocent. That's the main point, right? So to
Yeah.
most people, they probably wouldn't think so much about how Elmo is still out there. For me, that's a bit of a loose end.
Mhm.
Technically, if Andy wanted to do something, he could, because he does have his name.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the movie's also, you know, you don't notice it when you're watching it, but it's a pretty long film as it is. You know, it's so well made that, again, you don't really care, but they probably couldn't have tied up every loose end. And besides, that wouldn't necessarily be realistic, you know, especially since another theme of the movie is justice not being served for most people.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's not really realistic, but ah, it's
Or unless they were keeping it real, like how Andy was being attacked by the sisters, and then Morgan's like, I wish I could say he fought the good fight, but
Yeah,
you know, shit like this really does happen in real life. And it's like
yeah,
maybe leaving it like that. Like sometimes the real criminal does get away. Like
yeah, yeah, exactly.
yeah, this stuff unfortunately does all happen in real life. Another thing that I was thinking while I was watching this movie is like, damn, in real life, there probably are innocent ass people who are convicted of crimes they never did,
Yeah, absolutely.
which is awful.
probably at the wrong time.
Wrongful convictions. Also, what's even worse is sometimes people are executed for crimes they didn't commit. So yeah, it's an unjust world out there a lot of the time. I'm gonna depress myself if I keep talking about this, but let's back to the movie. But you know, one thing I really appreciated was visual storytelling in this film. There was a shot that stood out to me when Andy is first being walked into Shawshank. The camera sort of adopts his point of view and it cranes upward to look at like the high prison tower as he's going under an arch. And then the arch just like covers the entire frame and it fades to black. And I thought that did a great job of just conveying the size of this place and how dehumanizing it was going to be inside because everything just literally faded to darkness as Andy was walking in, you know?
My favorite thing about them panning about the building.
Yeah.
I actually watched the movie 3 times.
Nice. All right.
Since we had time. The third time I watched it with my girl, and then she made a comment. She was like, "Why does it look like a church?" And I was like, "You'll see why." So, so like their details, like it was pretty interesting how it all ties in.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I loved Morgan Freeman's great speech at the end of the movie about, rehabilitation being a made up word. I thought it was interesting that when he told the parole board what they wanted to hear on the previous 2 tries, they kept him in prison. And then when he just gave them this really bitter, really cynical speech, then they let him out. And I mean, I'm sure part of that was because he was a lot older than he had been before. But I don't know, maybe they let him out because they thought, hey, we finally broke this one or something like that, you know?
Yeah, that scene really had me thinking because
Mm.
like every 10 years he kind of gives the same spiel, which I
Yeah.
think he's being honest about it. Maybe that's just because Morgan Freeman is such a great actor, but I was believing him. And then once he finally is so jaded that he just doesn't give a fuck anymore and he just says well, how he actually really, really, really thinks of them, that's
Yeah.
when they let him out. You know?
Yeah.
So that had me thinking if he said some bullshit like that 10 years ago or 20 years ago, would they had let him out then? If that's the case, then he wasted more of his life just because he didn't curse them out earlier.
Mm.
I think it ties back into the whole conversation with him and Andy about hope. I think that was what made the difference. Now he low key had some hope on the outside, and that's what made his mentality shift, and he ended up saying the right thing. So I think like it was a testament that he actually did mentally change by that point.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And he did also say that the place was not the same without Dufresne, right? He said, I don't remember the exact line, but because they had become good friends in the prison after spending so much time there together that he did mention that, like, they miss him, or that it's just not, the place is just not the same without him, or something like that. Another thing that was hitting me as I was watching this, I was thinking about Red's character, and I was also thinking that obviously, yes, Dufresne is the protagonist, but we hear Red as the narrator and also see enough screen time with him that sometimes it feels like yeah, of course he's the deuteragonist, but at certain points I felt like he's almost like the main character as well, like almost just as important as Dufresne. Like, yeah, the movie opens up with the courtroom scene and he gets convicted and he goes to jail. That's how the movie gets set up. But the majority of this movie takes place in the prison, right? There's very little screen time of this movie that's outside of the prison walls. So we have Dufresne's conviction as the introduction to this film in the very beginning of the first act. But then basically the rest of this movie is inside the walls with Red, along with Dufresne, their friendship as it develops. So sometimes I felt like, is Red just as important as a character as Dufresne? Or is it that he's just the second most important character, and that's why it's like he gets that much time?
I'll say he's just as important, because like Dufresne can't even do everything. Well, I mean, I guess he could have gone through a competitor, but I don't think his stay there would have been as meaningful, or I don't think he would have gone the same path without Red.
Yeah. And again, Red's the one telling the story. And Red's not only telling the story, he's telling it to people by the end of the movie who have never met Andy. Like, you see prisoners like Red and his buddies talking about Andy to like new prisoners who never met Andy. And we see that story giving them hope. Like, oh, this guy got out. And did you hear about the time he got all of us like free beer? Things like that. So yeah, Red is absolutely critical to this film.
It's like
And not,
Andy's the main character and Red's the author.
yeah, basically. Pretty much. I mean, Stephen King liked to write about storytellers, and yeah, Red definitely fits that bill. He's the storyteller.
Yeah, this is probably one of the most memorable roles Morgan Freeman has taken, I think. I haven't looked at like awards or nominations that this film had garnered. I'm sure there were quite a few, but I don't know if the Academy, I mean, I don't put much faith in the Academy these days. I mean, this whole past year, what did everybody talk about that regarded the Academy was the whole Will Smith slapping Chris Rock, right? Not many people even talked about like the actual Academy Awards.
Right.
And I don't really put much faith in them anymore these days, but like that's the highest sort of achievement or award you can give a film, right? And I don't know if the Academy did honor Shawshank Redemption, this movie, like it deserved, but for Red, the character Red, his prison life kind of changed entirely once Dufresne became a prisoner there as well. And JM, you were saying off the record how their friendship was kind of the core of this movie, this storytelling. So
yeah, it's the heart of the movie. And it's a movie about two platonic friends whose friendship grows naturally and organically over time. And you absolutely believe in the bond between these two men, and you'd have no movie without that. Realms, you had mentioned an interview with Morgan Freeman earlier. I also saw one with, hang on, I'm about to forget the actor's name, Tim Robbins, where he was talking about this movie, and he said, in his opinion, one of the reasons why The Shawshank Redemption is so beloved today is because the happy ending feels earned. Like, these two go through so much together and separately. And by the end, yeah, they have absolutely earned every good thing that seems to be coming their way at the end of the film. Like that last shot where they hug, like, and I was teary-eyed watching that. It's a beautiful friendship and a beautiful film.
Would you describe the ending as happy? Like it was a happy ending or a bittersweet ending?
I'd say bittersweet.
Yeah.
Just because like a lot of good did come about for them in the end, but it's like they went through a lot of shit to get there though.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And Andy literally went through shit to get there.
Oh man.
Yeah, good point.
Andy had the roughest journey there. Red just had the longest stretch of time there.
Thank God it was raining when he got out on the other side, so he could get cleaned up right away.
Yeah.
I think the film as a whole is bittersweet. The ending by itself, I would say, is a happy ending because, yeah, they've suffered a lot, but they've also gotten to this point. It looks like they've both made a clean break. You know, the film doesn't give us any reason to think that they haven't. And, you know, they can finally enjoy the fruit of their labors and enjoy new lives in this borderline paradise. Like I know people say this, the town they end up going to is seen as like an analog for heaven by a lot of critics, you know?
Well, there was another line that Dufresne was saying about the what was the name of the town? It's
It starts with a Z, and I don't remember how to pronounce it.
Zihuatanejo.
Duatanejo, yeah, something like that, yeah.
Okay, so he mentions that like it's by the Pacific, and the way he described it is like it's a place where there's no memory. So I guess like the allegory there is they go there and they don't have to remember the past. They can forget about their past and just remember the new memories that they make. I guess that's one. I guess that's also kind of like hope in a way that kind of goes with the whole hope theme of this movie as well. But I get what you mean about like why this can be described as like the movie's bittersweet, but the ending is happy. To me, though, the only reason why I wouldn't call this a happy ending is because we have knowledge of how long they spend in the prison, 19 years, practically 2 decades. You know, if it was like, you know, 1 or 2 years that the film establishes that he's stuck there, despite everything that he has to go through, like getting raped multiple times and getting beat up multiple times, if that was in the span of like, I don't know, 2 years instead of almost twice as long, like 10 times as long, then I would say it's a happy ending. But to have to spend almost 2 decades and the other main character is spending 30 years, like almost as long as I've been alive, right? That's why I can't call this, to me, that just doesn't feel happy. Because can you imagine, can you even fathom, like all of us here, we're all in our 30s, right? That's basically us being born and going to prison and being the age that we are now. Like, can we even fathom that? And that's how long Red has been in there. As far as we know, it could have even been longer than that because we don't really know what the time frame is from when Dufresne escapes to when Red's parole is approved. So for that reason, and then also, of course, there's Brooks, who has spent nearly his entire life or the better part of his life in prison and is institutionalized or just indoctrinated and just can't take the outside, right? For those reasons, I would have to call the ending bittersweet. But I wouldn't say it's sad. It's not a bad ending. It's not an unhopeful ending. Bittersweet to me has always meant like, you know, there is happiness, but with consequences, with severe consequences. That's what a bittersweet ending means to me anyway. So and
I wanna say it was a luckily happily ending because like had they not met each other, then Red could have just ended up the same way as Brooks.
Yeah. All the things that had to go right too. He had to find the one oak tree by the one fence and whatnot.
Like and then I'm like, yo, when he was reading the letter, what if he fuck around and forgot the name of the town? Like, because that was a complicated ass name. I watched the movie 3 times. I still didn't remember the name. So he literally had to have been thinking about that damn near every night just to get the name.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Andy probably couldn't have written the name down because if somebody had intercepted the letter, they'd know where to find him.
Yeah. That as well. Oh, good thinking. Yeah, that's probably exactly what it was. Now that I think about it.
And I mean, he told you know, Red, remember this name, you know, before he got out. So that's probably why.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, that's brilliant, Jam. I did not even think of that, but that probably is a lot to do with it, or that's the exact reason why. Yeah. Wow. All right. Now, the only other thing that I can think of as something like a criticism, because there's not a lot for me to dislike about this movie, but the only other criticism that I would make is like, I also know, at least in fiction, and I'm sure in real life as well, that there are, like handyman people in prison who can get you something or whatever, and Red is that guy. I wish there was one scene where they just showed us how he gets the stuff that people like ask him for. There just
They,
one scene.
There was
they
a scene
showed a
like
little
that.
bit. Like
Yeah.
they showed that there's like a chain of people passing stuff along from the shipments that are coming into the building.
Yeah, we saw that how it gets distributed, but how does Red place the order to get that into the prison in the first place? That's the thing. Like, did we ever see that? Like, how does he actually get it acquired to make it get into the prison? The contraband, we would call this, right? How?
It's probably like a telephone thing. Like he told the guy who usually gives us the blankets, and then he connects back to the guy who gets some of the stuff.
Yeah,
that type of thing.
Okay.
Like I highly doubt it's like he has some way to contact somebody outside directly to be like, "Yo, give this to so and so to give this to me."
Yeah, exactly.
This guy, like he has his packs of cigarettes that he bargains with, so he's like, "Yo, you get this from so and so, and then I got this for you."
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah. It's a thing. Yeah. And the way you're describing it makes sense. So I guess it wasn't really necessary to put it on film. I don't think it was necessary. It's just something that I was curious about. And one last thing that I was curious about with this movie was the fact that the Daily Bugle, which is Spider-Man's newspaper, exists in the universe of this story being told. It was like the Portland Daily Bugle. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
That's Spider-Man's newspaper. Does this take place in some Marvel universe or something? Why was Daily Bugle in this?
I think Spider-Man stole the name from a real newspaper. Like, if I had to hazard a guess.
Oh, okay.
Because that I think that's a pretty common newspaper name.
The Daily Bugle. I only know that name because of Spider-Man. So if Spider-Man took it from like the real world, all right, then fine. I'll have to digress. But I thought it was the other way around.
I feel like cinema universes have kind of warped our brains because now we expect everything to be connected, and sometimes a movie is just a standalone story.
True, yeah. I mean, it could have also just been an Easter egg, but either way, this was way before the MCU. I mean, when this movie came out in 1994. Yeah.
94, yeah.
It'd be funny if, what's the name? The guy who actually did Andy's crime, he's actually like a Marvel villain or something.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That'd be funny.
MCU connections after all.
Yeah.
I know Robot Chicken did a parody of this movie with Morgan Freeman in it called like the Arkham Redemption, about the Joker breaking out of Arkham Asylum. And they had like the Batman like chasing Joker through the tunnel. And they do the thing where Batman wades through shit and he ends up getting out, and then the rain stops. And Batman just looks up and goes, "You gotta be kidding me." Just walks away. Like he's just covered in crap. To get back to your point earlier about the Academy Awards, so according to Wikipedia, it was nominated for 7 Academy Awards and it didn't win any. Morgan Freeman was nominated for Best Actor. There were nominations for Best Original Score, Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, but yeah, it didn't win anything. Yeah, it was nominated. It was acknowledged.
Yeah.
I feel like, this movie came out in the same year as Pulp Fiction and Forrest Gump. And among movie buffs, there's this debate over whether or not Forrest Gump should have beaten Pulp Fiction, because Forrest Gump did win Best Picture that year. And people say, Gump was the crowd pleaser, but Pulp Fiction was the innovative film. I'm also inclined to think you could make the case that Shawshank Redemption should have won Best Picture. Like, this is at least as good, in my opinion, as Forrest Gump, and probably more influential when it comes to film. Just my 2 cents, but if this film had won Best Picture, I would have said, yeah, that was arguably earned.
Yeah, I feel like it's considered a classic now, and I feel like if it did win any Academy Award, I feel like I wouldn't say it wouldn't be remembered more, but I think that would have been a fact about the movies that like, oh, it won this award and this award. But even being nominated,
Yeah.
I think, is a pretty big deal. So
It is an honor. But yeah, the Academy is a weird beast. Like I know Crash won Best Picture, and I think Crash has like it's like a thumbs down. No, it's got a rotten score on Rotten Tomatoes, which I know Rotten Tomatoes has its own problems, but like the Academy has very weird, very specific tastes that don't always reflect what the actual best movie is.
yeah,
So
I don't put much stake into the Academy for what it used to like mean, you know, like it used to be, I mean it kind of still is that like to promote future films, oh, like Academy Award winner Morgan Freeman stars as this character, this sort of thing. I mean that still does kind of happen, but nowadays with the Academy Awards and with Emmy Awards, like it's like these days I would only want things to like, you know, films or actors to get those nominations because it helps their careers. But for me personally, as an audience member, I don't need to see them win these awards to validate how like how I feel about how good their acting is or how good this movie is. It's only for like their careers. Like they deserve that because it'll earn them more like jobs, more like acting jobs or directing jobs or, you know, so on and so forth. Yeah, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah, and the Academy tends to like it's disproportionately likely to give like a period piece or a character driven drama the best picture nod or like, you know, award the best picture prize to that kind of film. Yeah, it likes period pieces. It likes very young, you know, best actresses. You know, a lot of older actresses really struggle, you know, on Oscar night a lot of the time. They've even made fun of it. Like I remember there was an actress who was on some comedy show saying, "I've noticed if you make a movie about the Holocaust, you're guaranteed an Oscar." And then a couple of years later, she made one about the Holocaust in real life and actually won an Oscar for it. So like she called the shot a couple of years in advance.
God damn.
Yeah, yeah, it was like Kate Winslet. There we go. I think it was Kate Winslet, the Titanic actress. I sound like a rube just saying that, but yeah.
In some strange way, that kind of reminds me of Eminem because Eminem always used to make fun of the Grammys, like diss the Grammys, but then he gets nominated for Grammy Awards after that. But decades later, he continues to make fun of them, like seriously, like insult them and stuff, and then they just stopped nominating him after that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then there was also the controversy last year with The Weeknd, who had one of the biggest hits of all time, Blinding Lights, and didn't get nominated for a Grammy for that or any nominations for that matter. But anyway, that's getting a little too much sidetracked. I think I may have wrapped up my thoughts for this podcast. Gentlemen, are there anything else you guys want to discuss, or do you want to go straight into ratings?
Nah, I can't think of anything else right now.
Yeah, I'm cool to go into ratings.
Well, you go ahead and go first, JM, because this was your choice.
All right. Yeah, as we said before, some critics have compared the viewing of this film to a religious experience. And honestly, I get it. It's not just hype. This is it's a hopeful film. It's an uncompromising film. It's got terrific acting, brilliant dialogue. I can see why it's on so many lists. It made me feel really thankful that I live at a time when this art form of cinema exists. It's a magnificent movie. I can't honestly, personally speaking for myself, I can't find any faults in this movie. I'm gonna award it a 10 out of 10. You know, I know some people have gripes about the way certain aspects of the movie have aged, and I think that's to be expected of any movie, but for me, this was a home run. You know, this was a buzzer-beating three-point shot. This was a fantastic movie, and I'm really glad that I got to experience it, and I'm glad that I got to talk about that experience with the two of you. So thank you for providing me with this space.
Woo! Woo!
Yeah. Oh my God.
You're welcome.
The listeners can't see, my co-host just like flailing his arms in the air, like watching the Apollo spacecraft land on the moon successfully. Like, we did it, yeah.
We love to see.
Yeah, that was your first perfect score on this podcast, I think.
It's definitely mine. I can't speak to the whole history of the podcast.
I'm gonna give this a 9.5 out of 10
right.
because it is probably one of the best movies I have ever seen. But it still makes me kind of feel like movies manipulate your emotions, right? And I take, on a personal level, I take that into account, and that's why I give it a 9.5 out of 10. But I would definitely recommend it. Everybody should see it. I mean, it's rated R, so everybody in their lifetime should definitely see it. And would I see it again? Yeah. Anytime there's like a movie night and this comes up as a suggestion, I'd be like, yeah, I'm down to see that one for sure.
All right. I am willing to go and say a 10 on this one. I'm willing to give it a 10. Mainly because it was able to capture me to a point where I was like, this might be one of my favorite movies. Like I almost said my favorite. Like, so for it to make me think like that, that makes me think it's worthy of the appraisal that it's been given. So I'll give this a 10.
Woo! Woo! This is coming from a guy who saw it 3 times, like just in the space between our last review and this one.
True. Oh,
yeah.
Which can mean my opinion is biased. I've seen it too many times. I've grown too attached.
Hey, it's a movie that deserves our attachment. It's a good movie.
And not only did I watch it 3 times, but this is a 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
2.5.
You really gotta like a movie, like to watch a long movie back to back. Cause what was it? What the hell is the movie called? It was with Denzel Washington and I think her name is Valletta. She's the woman that's on How to Get Away with Murder. They're both very good actors, but the movie was strongly all dialogue the entire movie, and it's like it was good acting, but it's not something that I could sit through more than once. Like, that movie actually was putting me to sleep. But like this movie's 2 hours long. I was engaged the entire time, all 3 times. So yeah, I'm willing to sit with my opinion on this one.
There's not a bad scene in the movie. You know, it's like The Godfather. You could turn it on anywhere and you're going to be tuning into something good. Like if this is on television, you could pick it up at any point and it'll hook you and carry you through the rest of the way.
Yeah, this one was a roller coaster. It's got me like thinking like about different stuff in the movie. Like when Brooks, when he was being released and then he had the knife to his throat, like it had me wondering like, yo, did he pick him because of the shit that he did in the beginning? Like he bet on that guy and then it ended up causing him to lose his life. Like was that the reason he picked him as the one? He was like, I'm willing to get rid of him so I can stay because of like some kind of messed up shit he did before. Even though he was, sorry that ended up happening. Like you could tell he was low key sorry about it, but it made me wonder different things about the movie.
There are layers.
The lunch scene where Brooks was asking Dufresne for the worm, I was afraid that Brooks wanted to eat it, but then it's like, oh,
it looked like it. He pulls it towards his body, and then I've got a crow in my pocket.
Shit, that's a Hakuna Matata. Oh my god.
Best plot twist ever. We can all agree then. I mean, even if I didn't give this movie a perfect score, I obviously think highly of it. So can we all agree this movie is a masterpiece?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah.
Like they paid attention to a lot of different details in this movie. Like they even in beginning scenes, like they were hinting to things without even getting to that part yet. Like you see, like they show like a glimpse of the leader of the sisters. Like you already see him like scoping Andy like before they even introduce him to what he's about. Like they had a lot of detail in there.
I want to go back and rewatch the scene which takes place in the last night Andy spends in prison, because afterwards Red says, you don't really pay attention to a fella's shoes because apparently he was wearing the dress shoes. I want to go back and rewatch that scene to see if I can spot the dress shoes. You know,
They don't show them.
They don't-
oh, they
show
don't.
'em.
Oh, okay, to cut it
Yeah.
off. All right,
'Cause
fair
I
enough.
did look for that. I did.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, he was looking.
When the only parts they showed like maybe like from his knees up,
Yeah.
and then maybe like his shin or whatever. But like I know when he was sitting down, and you were like wondering, oh, is he gonna kill himself because he got the rope? They
Yeah.
never showed below his shins.
Okay, gotcha. But still, a lot of details to look out for.
Yeah.
Hey.
One last thing that I forgot to mention: Mark Rolston, who plays Boggs, like the main bull queer, like the out of the sisters, he was one of the cops. I think Warren Russ in Rush Hour, the first Rush Hour movie, which used to be when I'm like,
Oh,
My God, Rush Hour.
yeah.
I knew he looked familiar. I just
Yeah.
didn't know where the fuck from.
Oh man, I haven't thought about those movies in years.
Oh man. Okay.
Ah,
All right.
Jackie Chan, you wonderful man.
Yeah. There's another legend right there. Who's
I think it's on you.
me?
I think so.
Oh,
Because yeah, Realms, you picked the last one, I think.
Premonition. Okay.
Yeah, because we talked about how you liked sort of time loopy movies. So yeah, I remember that. Okay, so yeah, you're up, dude.
Okay, so I'm gonna nominate a movie that's a blind watch for me. It's part of a series, and it's a movie that I have been wondering about watching for a while. We talked about Will Smith briefly earlier in this podcast, only because we were talking about the Academy and why was the Academy most talked about this year? Will Smith and Chris Rock. So
Slap.
The Slap. A
Yep.
few years ago, right before the pandemic started, the coronavirus existed already, COVID-19 already existed, but quarantine, the pandemic, that hadn't started just yet. Very early 2020, there was a movie came out that I wanted to see and I didn't get around to it. Bad Boys for Life, or Bad Boys 3. Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty sure I've seen Bad Boys 1 and 2, if not from beginning to end, bits and pieces of it, but I have not seen at all Bad Boys for Life, which I think is the official title of Bad Boys 3. So the second Bad Boys movie had a lot of funny scenes to it. I often go back on YouTube to watch the Reggie scene, and I heard Reggie is in the third Bad Boys movie. So yeah, that's what I'm putting out there for the September episode.
All right.
Bad Boys.
Oh, life.
Live. All right, cool. So that just about does it for this episode of MGI. You've been listening to the voices of
Chill with Rounds.
Jurassic Mark.
and Osheem, the one and only. Thank you all for listening to us, and catch us again when school starts in September.
And also be nice to people. Don't be a Duma. Don't be an Alexandria Dumas or dumbass.
I'll just end by saying geology rocks.
Nice.
Old joke, but I love it.